Hey everyone, my name is Sri. Today we're going to be doing challenge 3 of Unit 3 with Unity Create with Code. What we're going to be doing in this challenge is actually something called balloons, bombs, as well as booleans. So I believe this is going to be a bit more fun of a concept to learn compared to challenge 2. The amount of things that you learn within Unity Unit 3 is a lot compared to Unit 2, except for Unit 1 and 2 is of course the basics. This one's going more in depth with those the basics. Um, and of course what we learned from last time is that we cannot use the asset store sadly, which makes our lives a whole lot easier to import. However, we're just going to be using the same base files that the website provides, and I believe this is again due to the Unity store or the asset store being on first release while the actual challenge files themselves being on a different release, meaning there's going to be incorrect, I guess, variations in code or even updates within code. So anyway, let's go ahead and start. Generally, whenever I do these projects, I always like to click the mark as completed. It gets me XP points, just gamifies this entire, I guess, learning experience a bit. And it also just lets me keep track of where I am in that progress. So if I were to scroll up or scroll down randomly, I don't have to read through the exact prompts to see where I am. Anyway, the first two are always generally just like, hey, did you actually install or did you import the challenge 3 project files? And we're just going to go ahead and do that. But the first thing that we need to do actually is, launch up Unity and create a new project file. So anyway, we're going to pull this up in Unity 3D. We're going to call this challenge 3. And I'm going to go ahead and put this into a different folder. Let's go ahead over to my documents, school, game design, and we're going to create a new folder called Unit 3. And let's place this here. And let's create that. While that's loading up, it might take some time. I'm going to go ahead and install the Unit 3 challenge files, and this may take some time to download, depending on your internet connection. And I want to open this one up. Let's go navigate back to that. Folder that we place everything in. Perfect. So here we have our challenge 3, as well as we could import or replace our challenge 3 starter files. Perfect. Now that we got that things in, let's see if our Unity's finished setting up yet. Ooh, seems to be busy for quite a bit. I'll go ahead and start the video back up once all this is over. Perfect. The Unity environment seems to have loaded pretty immediately. Alright, so let's go back over to our Create with Code challenge task. Let's go. It says to open up our prototype 3 project, as well as download the starter files, which we have done, and then import the Unity package into our project. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So remember how to do that last time? We want to go ahead and click on Assets, Import, Package, Custom Package, and then navigate over to your actual folder that includes the Unity starter files. And of course, we have access to Unity package here. There we go. So we could actually hand select what we want here and what we don't want. However, in this starter package, we want to import everything. Just a general reference. Now with all of our Unity starter files imported into the scene, we can successfully say that we finished the step, haven't we? Alright, so we have in the project window assets challenge 3 instructions folder, use Unity 3 outcome video as a guide to complete the challenge. That's alright, we don't want to do that. Let's just go ahead and do this as blind as possible. And of course it's just a warning, pretty depressing if you don't know, if you had to delete it, because it is a challenge after all. So let's go ahead and move on. So the first thing it says is the player cannot control the balloon. Interesting. Let's go ahead and import the scene. There we go. I think we're a bit in reverse. So let's go ahead and see where we're dealing with. There we go. So we have access to 3 different sprites. We have the bomb, we have the money, and we have the balloon. Okay, so we got that idea placed in set. Let's go ahead and run this game really quick. That seems very bug-ridden. And we also have our console already saying that a whole bunch of objects cannot be spawned. That's not good. So let's go ahead, stop here. It seems that the game's also running whenever it says game over. That's not good either. And where in the world's our player? Our balloon. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what we can do. So let's go back over to the website, and it says the player cannot control the balloon. The balloon should float up as soon as the player presses the spacebar. Okay, so let's go ahead back over to our console and see what happens. It says our player controller has an object reference of, I believe, what's known as null. It's a null reference exception. And this is going to be within our player controller X. So if I go to our player, it's going to have a whole bunch of scripts to it. Spin objects, player controller, but we want to notice that says player controller x.start. Of course, if you double click on the actual error, it will be able to pull up the script almost immediately. I use an application called Rider. It's a JetBrains product, which is something you have to pay for. Of course, I use a student package, which lets me have it for free when this costs hundreds of dollars. But anyway, let's go ahead and see where that null exception is. If we pull this down, it says our null exception is at line 28. So let's go ahead and navigate to our line 28. Here we go. So it says at force vector 3 times 5 force mode impulse. That seems about right. So what's the problem here? Shouldn't we have a player RB assigned just the same way as we have player audio defined? So let's go ahead and actually add that kind of reference here. So player RB dot equals, let's go ahead and maximize the screen a bit. Player RB equals get component of rigid body, and of course add the special semicolon, which is required. Okay, let's go ahead and see what this application does now. It's going to go ahead and reload all scripts, and let's start the game. There we go. We don't have an error anymore, but the problem is we're still not able to see the balloon, which seems really odd. I'm going to go ahead and check where this camera begins with. Okay, so this camera seems to encompass about everything. Yeah, it seems to be encompassing everything. So this camera is probably not the problem. What seems to be the problem is probably the Spawn Manager X, or the Prawns object. I'm going to go ahead and click on Spawn Manager X, and let me just go ahead and see what is it supposed to be spawning here. It seems to be spawning the correct things, but I'm going to go ahead and see if it's a later issue in this project. After a bit of bug testing, I kind of realized what our problem was. If we go and click on the player object, it seems to be floating incrementally without any, like, I guess, idea of where is it going. Of course, let's go ahead and run this project over again. If we continue to actually let this game run, it's going to keep on going down and down under the platform itself, which is what we do not want, because this platform itself is at level 0, meaning it's going underneath the camera's radius. So let's go ahead and actually press the whole bunch of space bars on this game, and let's see what happens. There we go. But now it seems to be going all the way to, I guess, what's infinity. 3,000, and I guess it's going to increment to 4,000. That's not correct. Let's go ahead and see what it wants me to do again. So I guess we technically finished this one. I'm not satisfied, but it's probably something we're going to be dealing with later. Let's go ahead and take these things one step at a time. So number 3 is now finished. It floats up whenever I do press the spacebar, but it seems to be floating up endlessly. Let's go ahead and see the next task. It says the background only moves when the game is over. That is a problem that we already have seen. If we do not press the spacebar, the game already ends almost immediately. But if we do press the spacebar, it goes up for infinity, meaning that it doesn't collide with anything, but it kinda can. So what can we do here? If the background only ends when the game is over, doesn't that mean that we need to probably check that if statement that we learned from a previous task? Let's go to open up our Unity, and let's open up our Rider console, and let's open up where our move script is. So let's go over to scripts, move left, here we go. So if we take a look around here, we have to look for the game over. If the player console is game over, then we want to start moving the world. That's a bit odd. It's saying that if it's game over, then it wants to start moving. If game over is already true, then wouldn't this always... sorry, if game over is already false, then wouldn't this start moving once it's true? So I guess what we need to do is add a not sign, or whenever we add an exclamation point in front of an actual variable in an if statement that says if the game is not over, then it's going to run this. So instead of waiting for it to be game over and then running this, it's going to say, oh, as long as it's not game over, then we could continue running this side of the script. Let's go ahead and run this game now and see how that looks. There we go. We seem to be now actually running this game perfectly fine. Let's go check on the player, and of course it's still going to infinity. Alright, so that's at least one problem down, something I am a bit satisfied with. Let's go over to our website and say that we can mark this as complete. The background only moves when the game is over. And now it stops when the game is over. So I guess this is what the problem that I had before. It says no objects are being spawned. Make money or bombs spawn every single few seconds. Alright, let's go ahead and settle this out. If we remember from our console, it says prawns object. That's a bit odd. If we remember from doing Unit 3, Create with Code task, there is no such thing as prawns object. Maybe it's trying to reference something like spawns object. So I'm going to go ahead, double click on this error, and see if it's going to lead me to a script. Of course it doesn't, so let's go over to our spawn manager script and take a look for prawns object. There we go. So it's saying our method name, invoke repeating, meaning it's going to put this method name on repeat, and with our delay and interval, and it's going to try summoning prawns object. However, take a look. Prawns object does not equal spawn object. So I'm going to go ahead and replace spawn object with prawns object with spawn object, and run this game once again. And let's see if the money and bomb actually runs this time. Okay, so it does seem to be actually producing money and bombs this time around. That's wonderful to know. So let's go ahead and stop this game, go over to our website, and say mark as complete, because we now finished number 5. Number 6 states, fireworks appear to the side of the balloon. Make the fireworks display at the balloon's position. Okay, so if we go ahead over to our balloon, or our player, and take a look at the fireworks object, then it seems to be set pretty fine, but let's go ahead over to our player once again. Everything seems to be pretty fine. Let's go to our player object, and let's see what happens here. So, there seems to be no designation of a fireworks. There is explosion particles and a fireworks particles, so that's interesting. Let's see where these are actually called. These are going to be called over here at fireworkparticle.play and money sound. Okay, so what's the problem? It seems to be running to the side of this balloon instead of being in front of the balloon or on the balloon. Alright. Maybe the problem that we have with this is not that the fact that it's spawning incorrectly using the script, but the fact that it's not on the player to begin with. But let's see where this fireworks position is. It's all the way over here when it should be technically over here, shouldn't it be? So let's go ahead and actually reposition it to the same Y, X, and Z as our player. Oh, that seems a bit odd. Okay, I forgot it's relative to the actual balloon, so let's increase, or let's actually put this accordingly. Let's put this over to 0. Let's set this over to 0. And there you go. It's now underneath the balloon. But maybe you just want it a bit more higher. There you go. Let's set it to 0.5. There you go. Now let's run this again. The balloon still seems to be incrementing without bounds. But now that we know that we have finished this, let's take a look at the next, next task. The background is not repeating properly. Make the background repeat seamlessly. Okay, I got you. So let's take a look back at our Unity and click on repeat background X. What seems to be the problem is that we're trying to repeat width, but it says size Y. Of course, as we know, length is usually y-axis and width is usually x-axis, and what we learned from a previous is that this is not the correct case. We want our repeating width to be associated with our x-axis, as we're going to be going long way. Okay, so let's go ahead over to our Unity and see if this fixes anything. This should now update the background seamlessly. There you go, and it looks incredibly comfortable. So now we know that we finished that, let's go back over to our 7 and say mark as completed. And here I am noticing that there is no reference to why the balloon goes up almost immediately. That seems really odd. So it says the balloon can float too high. Prevent the flare from floating the balloon too high. Maybe this is our key into why it does do that. So let's go back over to our script of player controller and let's see what makes the balloon float too high. Okay, so we have right here in our update, whenever you do press the space button, it's going to add force up to the floating force. I think this is more of accumulation, but let's go ahead and see if we can make this lesser. Of course, it's also going to float up at the start. So let's just see if we could actually make this, I guess, a lot more controlled. So let's do a public bool top, below top. There we go. In our public bool below top, let's go over to the update method and say if the transform.position.y, let's go back over to our script and see where is the top of the script, or where is the top of the ceiling. I'm going to go ahead and actually increase this up here. Let's just put it if it's under or if it's above 13. Okay. Let's just say if it's above 15, then it's too high. So if it's above 15, then below top. Let's actually rename this over to too high. Too high equals false. Oh. Else too high equals true. And I'm just gonna go clean this up a bit to make our lives a lot more easier. There we go. So now it should be able to see if now we should have a Boolean statement of if it's too high or too low. So let's go down here and actually implement that here. So and too high. And this should now be able to fix our problem of the balloon floating too high. At least put a cap on the player itself. That seems to be a problem. Okay, so let's go back over to our script and see what's the problem. So if it's above position 15, then it says it's too high. It's false. But if it's else is too high is equal to true. So let's set this over to 5, and let's see if this works. So it does seem to work pretty fine. The problem is our jump factor is too high of a take. So I cannot spam the jump bar past 5, but I cannot press the space bar if it's past 5, but it's just jumping too high to begin with. So I'm gonna actually have to control how high it jumps. Let's see if that's a gravity modifier here, or is it a add force here. See our player, our float force, let's make this 10, and let's make this 15 again. We seem to be collecting coins, but of course our balloon's off screen. Perhaps it's just because our there you go. So our balloon was actually off the screen, and that's a mistake I have made. And our balloon also seems to be floating perfectly fine. At least we fixed 2 problems in one go. And I'm gonna actually decrease down to like 12. There we go. And now the balloon can drop below the ground. Can it? It probably can. So let's see if we could fix that. A way that we learned in our previous lessons was that we should add a tag to the ground modifier. And let's call this ground. Let's go back over here, add ground, and let's add a player controller. On collision enter if it interacts with ground, else if other.gameObject.compare tag is equal to ground, then and not game over, player RB dot add force vector up times 10, because we want to make sure it floats back up again, force mode impulse, and this should prevent it from hitting the ground and immediately adds a force upwards. And let's go ahead and run this once more. So let it fall. And it does seem to be bouncing. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and actually decrease this position here. Let's see, actually decrease this to 8. There we go. And let's see what our next task is. So it does seem to be above ground, make the balloon off the ground. There should be a sound effect while doing this as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and see what sounds we have access here. So we have spin objects, prefabs, sounds. Here we go. So blip, boing, boom, music. So the blip is probably going to be used whenever we hit the money. The boing is going to be what we want for our bounce sound, and the boom is probably our bomb itself. So let's go ahead and add the boing to our bounce. So in our in our audio, or in our player controller, let's go ahead and add a new audio clip called Boing public audio clip Boing. Let's scroll all the way down. I'm now going to make this a multi-line if statement and add player audio dot play one shot Boing, and let's do this for 1.5 f. And let's finally see how this results. It's very quiet, so we could probably increase this a bit more. I'm actually gonna probably turn down the music to be able to hear these objects, but it's fairly audible. Ooh. So let's go ahead and actually increase the scale over to 2f, or 2.0f. And let's come back here. And let's see if it's a bit more audible now. That seems to be odd. It's not even playing actually. Let's actually take a look down here. There is no Boing for audio clip. That was completely my own assumption. So this is going to be incredibly loud, isn't it? There we go. And the game is now playable. And we have now finished all of the following achievements. Therefore, I can successfully say that we don't need our hints, nor do we need our... Oh, and we finished our 9, and we have finished our Unit 3 Challenge 3 create task.